back to another episode of Pro Tribe Conversations. Once again, we have the infamous hashtag man called Amp Harrell. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time doing the reintroduction because we have all the information where we need it on the subtext or whatever we need. But except to remind people that one of my favorite things about Amp is he's got a unique perspective on humans and humanity and how that applies to business. He's all about getting the cheese, for instance, and I want people to understand. Here's Amp. Let's just riff for 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever feels right, Amp. And by the way, this is college football Saturday. This is not my undergrad. This is my grad school, but it was kind of fun to root for, and there's stories behind that. So, maybe tell me your college. Yeah,
I was going to say, this isn't college. That's just a fun hat that I've kind of got an inside joke with the best man from my wedding about just how we've become obsessed with pickles as a society. And I pointed out that this minor league team out of Michigan, the Great Lakes Loons, their one-off for the Copa La Diversión is the spicy pickles of the North. And next thing I know, it's sitting on my desk at work. So, yes. But my alma mater, Middle Tennessee, go Blue Raiders. In fact, as we're recording this, it's homecoming out at Walnut Grove in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, as they take on Marshall and try to hopefully snap, I believe, a 3-game losing streak on homecoming. So got to get off the schneid. They're 60% or so all time in homecoming games. So got to get it done for the one true pride of the blue.
You know, just saying the words homecoming, I feel a chill. It feels like fall. That's something that has some connotations from my high school and college, or young college experience. And here we are, and it's a beautiful day in Seattle, man. And it doesn't feel like fall yet. But yeah, this is the last day of summer too. Speaking of weather and how things feel. So
I've got the screen door open a little bit here, and I've got a bit of a chill flowing through the, not studio, through the dining room area. But either way, it's feeling more like fall than it has in a while. And yeah, with the pads popping, hard to believe this was week 3 of high school football season in Washington, and I believe it's either week 4 or week 5 in Tennessee. They start a little earlier there.
Well,
but I need to see if my alma mater managed to improve to 2-2, because they had a tough schedule to start things off back east.
This back east and being from someplace, Amp, this is something we've talked about before, and I'm curious about how you feel as I was fascinated when we first met that you had a pretty fresh perspective of, wait a minute, this is different. Seattle is not the same thing. Washington's not the same thing as Tennessee. And there's some things you observed that anybody who's not been anyplace else is not aware how things are different than wherever they're from. And you remember me telling you that I was a Navy brat, so we moved all the time. So that was a recurring lesson in my childhood. But you have it's been fun to hear you talk about what you soak up about the Pacific Northwest, what you observe that Washingtonians don't know about themselves. And you had some interesting comments about, wait a minute, Tennessee, how other people think of Tennessee. Anyway, so that conversation, I'm over talking, but I'm curious about how's that changed?
Well, if anything, I feel like it's been a little bit more galvanized. I'm going to try and stay as clear of the politics as possible because, well, you've mentioned the getting of the cheese. And one thing that head versus heart has really gotten involved for 20 years is if you open your mouth about something political, you're going to offend half of your potential customers, your potential listeners, and all of that. But what I will say is that those political divides between the Pacific Northwest and the Mid South, Deep South, all of that, if anything, they've deepened and deepened and deepened. But it's curious to see the pockets of resistance on either side. Case in point, in Tennessee, the state went about 75% for Trump in, I believe, the last 3 elections. And there are 95 or 96 counties in the state. They're really small. About 6 or 7 of them will fit into Snohomish County, just for example. There are 39 counties in Washington, but only 2 to 3 of those counties went noticeably blue. And that includes the college campuses. Like they still are not the pull like they are in a California or a Washington or something like that, where you've got young people, you've got the the more educated, the professors, and we can talk about bias in college campuses and all of that a little later on, but it doesn't have that gravitational pull of pulling everything blue. If anything, it's a little purple. But in Tennessee, and in Texas for that matter, it's not like it's a monolith. It's not like liberals don't exist or progressives or Democrats or whatever.
Right.
They're just completely drowned out. And in Tennessee, my experience was that the blue folks just kind of kept their mouths shut, whether it was fear of consequences or reprisal or being ostracized or what. They just kind of kept it shut. And so it sounded like Tennessee was a monolith. Well, you shift that to out here, and pretty consistently over the last several elections, it's been about 2/3 blue, 1/3 red. It's much more red, much more and more and more red as you go east, but the
Right.
population decreases, so the percentages are still kind of thrown off. But out here, that outnumbered 2-to-1, 3-to-1 minority does the exact opposite. They bark, they
Yeah.
yell, they
Yeah.
rant and rave and say, I did not vote for this. This is not me. If you guys have a problem, that's your problem because I voted for this and not this. And it's just such a weird dichotomy that business tends to skew more conservative. Colleges and I guess more sensitive topics, those groups tend to skew more liberal and progressive. But by and large, out here, the the minority is going to yell a lot louder than those that have more of the votes and more of the power. And that's been one of the weirdest things to get used to. I had to tell someone who just moved in that just because you're seeing all these signs and hearing all of these announcements and all of that doesn't necessarily represent the electorate. They're just trying to make sure their voices are heard.
Yeah. And that being heard and more importantly, being understood is an important thing. And that's where we get to, there's a tie into what you and I each do professionally is we need to get noticed. So people say, hey, you got to call, hashtag man called ant because, and how that's going to help your business or whatever. So get some attention and understand why would somebody have the right people contact you versus the wrong people. And anyway, it's the same struggle we all have, but we have to keep on trying. We got to keep kicking. We got to keep chasing the cheese because people aren't going to spoon feed us that cheese, right? So I'm
Well, and
overusing
that I think
using the metaphors here, but
well,
um,
that kind of gets to what we were talking about before we started recording, I think, which is kind of expectation versus reality, squeaky wheel, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Is that when I was in high school and college, I was just convinced that when I got that degree, I was going to have every opportunity open. And
yeah,
some of it was market factors. By that, I mean I graduated right into the Great Recession.
yeah, yeah.
And some of that was just not knowing how to use the tool that you've been given. I'm not going to look into the center of that camera and say that it's not worth it to get a college degree because we both know that that's Bravo Sierra. But either way, if you are given a tool and not shown how to use it, it's useless. And whether that tool is a key, a gun, a hacksaw, or a pen, if you don't know how to use the tool, it's not worth using. And that was me with the degree. And so I tried a little bit, knocked on some doors, tried to get that big broadcaster job, and it didn't happen if for no other reason than I was using the tool wrong. It's like trying to hammer in a nail with another nail. It just didn't work because I was trying to get a January job in May and was shocked that the world wasn't moving for my needs. And so eventually I burned out and gave up and took what I could get. And here we are 15, 20 years later. And I'm going, wow, why am I not getting these opportunities? Well, it's because you stopped asking, bro. It's not the world's job to go find you. You have to go out and get the things you want, whether that's a sale, whether that's money, or whether that's another opportunity.
There's a I can't let this opportunity go by to comment about well, what you just described reminded me when I was asked to come here in Seattle. An alumni organization called the Seattle Sun Devils. Pretty great, and I've been around other alumni that are all either a bunch of old geezers or all kids drinking, and the Sun Devils seem to have a pretty nice balance of all of them. But in through that, there are two different opportunities where I was said they were going to bring the full-time kids, MBA kids, up to go tour Microsoft or Amazon or something, and then they're having a happy hour. Hey, Brian, would you like to come talk to the kids? And I would stand there with my beer, and they'd circle around me as if they're listening to Yoda to give them some wisdom from on high.
Ooh.
And they were just, I mean, they were leaning in hard, and I kind of annoyed them because they're all bragging about they all had perfect, 4 point, never messed anything up. And I said, that's not helpful, dude. And I was sharing with them, nobody cares about your credential. What can you do? Tell me about your best fuck up and what'd you do about it. That's interesting because, and I came from, I wasn't, I started out as a screw up. It took me 40 years to get 20 years to get a 4-year degree. Thankfully, only a couple more to add to it. So I was not a good student. But this point of, I could shorten all that to say, I advise these people, get this degree as if there's no piece of paper in there. Go learn stuff, go meet people, go figure stuff out, because the credential is kind of worthless. And I was thinking of that in the 90s. I guess the double aughts by then. So that's the point. And that's where I'm curious about how people think. Well, I had a different attitude. The degree, the credential is not the point, but what do you learn? Who do you know? What relationships can you cultivate from that? And anyway,
Well,
so that was kind of my thought.
learning
And
from
that's what I'm trying
failure.
to cheer. Well, just to finish the point, the conversations today about people kind of just dump university experiences one category or another. And I think they're misguided if they think the credential is the gift, but rather whatever the experience is, what people learn, the screw ups are more valuable to employers. And because I don't think it was been since I was 20, maybe you could still, if an MBA meant 100 grand or whatever the equivalent was back then, but that hasn't been the case for a long time. Nobody cares. Everybody's got a degree. And I don't know about you, but I know guys, especially in technology, they got straight D's in high school or dropped out, but they can, they're gifted coders or connectors or whatever. They have a skill. They can do things. But I'm
Yeah,
still,
I've had that discussion with my wife before because she and I met when she was in grad school, and she was going
uh,
to grad school where I did undergrad, and I just kind of
okay,
stayed in that orbit and floated
smart
around
man.
it. I've considered getting an MBA, but I haven't really seen the direct correlation with my career and where I'm at that it's going
Yeah,
to be worth the time, money, and effort. But when she was going through that program and getting her first jobs after grad school, there was
right.
that sort of emphasis on the degree and the college and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, but from my experience, nobody cares. What can you do? Can you justify your salary? How can you benefit things? And so just different backgrounds of coming from one that values college and values grad school and values master's degrees and doctorates and all of that versus one where it's high school if you're lucky and school of hard knocks and get the cheese, get what you can get, support your family, support your life, and anything else is gravy. One thing I think you were kind of angling towards, though, is, and not to bury the lead on the wife story, she's kind of seeing that now that after several years in the field, it's as much about what you know, who you know, and how you are able to do your job as it is about the credentials on paper. So I've had to learn some things the hard way too about connections and applied knowledge and all of that. So not to say that I know anything more than she does. It's just which which arena are you going to battle in? But something I think you're angling towards is the college experience
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
how a lot of times nowadays that's vilified, whether it's from burned out people who they thought that this degree was going to get them somewhere, and either they didn't get the degree, or they did and it didn't help, or they wound up in debt and can't pay off that, or whatever it is, or it's the ideological thing of the war on woke and brainwashing people and all of that. I admittedly have not had that much college experience. I went to a college, got my degree in 4 years, and ran for the hills. But
Okay, good point. Good
I've
perspective.
I've considered going back. I kicked around Belmont and covered a little bit of soccer there. I tried to network at Austin P when I was fresh out of college because that was the closest, well, one of the closest colleges geographically. I've briefly considered seeing what the U District is all about now that I'm here in the Seattle area. So I'm aware of the differences. I know there's a very big difference between Evergreen State University and the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. I get that, or Evergreen State College, excuse me, not a university, but still, go Gooey Ducks. But with that in mind, I know that there's a world of difference between those, but not one size fits all experiences, first of all. And second of all, with that, colleges tend to pull things to the left. Yes and no. But I went to a state college in in Tennessee. It was a land grant college that started as a teacher's school back in 1911. And compare that to even my experiences when I was touring UCLA and USC, that it's night and day. They very they were very serious about First Amendment and equal opportunity. So there were, protests and this and that, but there were also um, religious groups that were sending their kids to hand you a flyer to proselytize to you. There
Yeah.
were the anti-abortion protests and the graphic high definition pictures of fetuses and the aftermath of an abortion. And so that's not the kind of thing you're going to get at NYU. That's not the kind of thing you're going to get at Harvard. And so to just blanket say that colleges just brainwash people because they're all just cesspools of liberal corruption and socialist communist views, no, that's not my experience at all.
I have found that what is there, and I marveled at this, both in Oregon State undergrad, and then I had to go to about 4 or 5 other schools to get all my undergrad credits done to get into the executive MBA at Arizona State. But the university experiences that I had had, including before I got any credentials, was that, man, there's a bunch of curious people around here, and you can look up a bunch of stuff. Pre-internet, and yes, there was college before that. I would loiter in the library. I remember taking my kid and his girlfriend, his high school, and said, "I got to do some stuff, and the library's right next door. You want me to?" And they just swam around, and I found them sitting down. Anyway, so that stuff,
Microfilm, that kind
the
of
X,
thing.
there
Looking at the
was,
old
yeah,
newspapers.
microfiche, yeah. But they were just walking around in the books and aisles, and it was a great thing. And having that level of stuff accessible, and I found my experience was it wasn't left or right, but there's everything. And the universities have people all over the world there, which is also a fun thing. You hear all kinds of languages and including Hawaiian pidgin, which is kind of comforting in Arizona State. Hey, bro, can you use a calculator? And turn around and I find a new friend. So anyway, but that in any environment where there are curious people, and this is a thing where I've been drawn to your perspective on things, is that your observation, you notice stuff about humans or humanity and regional differences. And man, I wish more people noticed stuff. People get so busy they don't notice or they don't wonder. So back that I really want to cultivate curiosity, and in particular about otherness, which is kind of my cause. If I had one thing, I want people to be curious about otherness, including otherness of culture or politics or whatever, to wonder, even if you disagree,
Well,
how'd you come up with that? And that you've had observations and kind of, I don't know if you had shifts, but you've had observations and awakenings. You weren't aware that things were different in the upper left versus, what do you call Tennessee? The mid, whatever,
mid south. It's
mid
generally
south,
mid south.
mid south versus upper left. There's some different trends, unless you've already broken down. You go east, it gets less lefty.
Yeah, I mean, like out here, there's a big difference in Eastern Washington and Western Washington, and that in and of itself can cause some linguistic hurdles because when I hear the East Side, I'm talking Bellevue,
Bellevue,
Washington, and
yeah,
Redmond and Kirkland and that sort of
yeah.
thing. The East Side of Seattle versus my wife's family. The East Side is the East Side of the mountains.
Yeah.
That's Wenatchee and Spokane and the Tri Cities. And like, no, there's a very big difference in that East Side and this East Side, and politics is just one of the things, but diversity of thought, of culture, of food. Not to say that I wouldn't, immediately go to Yakima for some tamales right now, but still, it's a whole different world even within the same state. But yeah, the cultures and traditions in a microcosm, just in the last 100 years. Case in point, the fair scone. Fair food means a lot of the same things in Tennessee and Texas and Washington and Oregon and whatever. You're going to get deep fried everything. You're going to get big old corn dogs and hot dogs and popcorn or kettle corn or nachos or loaded fries or whatever. But you get funnel cake in Tennessee, maybe fried pickles or fried Oreos or something like that. And out here you get elephant ears, which kind of got a little it's the same thing. It's just a big old sheet of dough. It's not in a swirly pattern, but same thing. And then the scone. And I legitimately thought people were jerking my chain when I heard you're gonna go get a what? Did I land in London? Didn't we win that war? And then somebody was like, no, just shut up and eat this. Holy crap, that's good. You guys have this every year? Yeah. Well, I got sent a text from the wife, and somebody went to the fair down in Puyallup, and they bought a scone plushie.
What?
What
is that?
It's a scone, like it's a stuffed animal. It's a scone turned on the long side with a face and little floppy arms and legs.
Oh,
and it's the most Washington thing I've ever seen.
That is,
and it's just one of those things that, like yeah, sure, you betcha, that you got to be here and understand it, or it just doesn't make any sense.
See, man, the fact that you've experienced that and can share that, I haven't been to Puyallup Fair. I went to some other fair when I first moved here in 2011, but I missed out on the scones, brother. So now I got to go do that.
Well, they have them at Evergreen State Fair. It's Fisher, and I'm assuming it's the same Fisher company that's Fisher Flour that used to own Como TV and Como Radio back in the day. And if you head down to Seattle Center, depending on what sign or who you ask, it could be the Como Plaza, or it could still be the Fisher Plaza or Fisher Pavilion. And so there's, we could talk for days on the shifts in media and the involvement of the big companies, and I could go on my soapbox about deregulation and all that fun stuff. But the media in the Seattle area was built on the Fishers. It was built on, of all things, Bonneville and the I guess the Mormon Church. Forgive me if I'm being culturally insensitive, but the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, I believe, is tied up in Bonneville, and that's the one that's owned Cairo TV and Cairo Radio at times throughout the past 50 or 100 years. And the Bullitt family, which is behind King, Classical King FM, King 5 TV, and King AM, which I don't actually remember what that became, but it used to be AM, FM, and TV all together, and then gradually these things have separated. But the Bullitts were just instrumental in shaping media in this area, and the Fishers, and Bonneville. And it's wild to see what they've collectively built, and it's also wild to see what it's changed into with the involvement of Sinclair, with Lotus coming in from California, with I'm losing my own train of thought here, but with Tegna, which I believe is the one that owns King 5, and just all of these different massive companies coming in and changing what was hyper local into something to serve a whole region. And so I don't have that history. I have about 6 years, if we're being generous, of history in this area, but I'm fascinated about what makes an area the way that it is. And so one of my most successful social media posts of all time, I went into some community Facebook groups and said, I'm new to this area, and my entire universe centers on Middle Tennessee. And so I know about their classic products and commercials and all the in-jokes and all that. But what would you tell me if I just, crash landed in your front yard that I should have grown up trying? What would have been in your grandmother's pantry? Where did you go after Little League football or Little League baseball games? And I had 300 comments in like 2 days. And so, case in point, I always get Juanita's chips. I've got Tillamook ice cream and yogurt in the fridge and freezer right now. I'm getting all of these things, and some of them are still around and are still fantastic. You mentioned Oregon State. Beaver mustard is some of the best stuff around, by the way. And some of it has, just in that short amount of time, has gone away, like Triple X Burgers in Issaquah. Thankfully, it's becoming a Burger Master, so it's still somewhat local, but I didn't get to try the root beer and the big old artery clogger special at Triple X Burgers because it went away before I got a chance to try it. And so I've been here long enough to see the Washington that I knew already start to change.
Man, I feel like we got to just make that a snippet. This is like upper left 101, upper left Pacific Northwest 101, because you captured that. There are people who have lived here their whole life who couldn't have provided that stream of consciousness just then about what is important and what is influential up here. So I love that
Well,
about you.
and
And
you were
that's an example of noticing. You notice stuff that there are people who, wait, what? This is not everywhere. You know that this is not everywhere. And you can share that. That's what you bring to the locals that they don't even know about themselves. We don't
well,
know
you were
about
trying to get
ourselves.
that out of me because I didn't quite know what we were going with here because there are so many hornets nests that we could kick just without trying. And what's the difference in Tennessee and Western Washington? And I could say 5 words and ignite a firestorm. But the little things and one of my favorite Washington isms. We're Mariners fans here. Pretty much all of us are,
Sure.
and it's tough. Again, only been here 6 years. It's still tough, but trying to chase down that division title, trying to get the pennant, trying to go to the Fall Classic, but there are just some things about being a Mariners fan that just don't make sense to anybody else. And one of them is those commercials. And there's a Bellevue based. Oh, you haven't seen the Mariners commercials?
Well, I
This
have,
could
but
be
I
a
don't
fun
quite.
deep dive.
I've seen the commercials, but I don't have your perspective as a sports aficionado.
Well,
Uh,
so here's the thing. So yes, they had some phenomenal years. They
yeah.
still hold the record, as far as I know, for most wins in a season. They had King Felix, they had Ichiro, they had Edgar, they had Junior, they had all of these great talents. Can't forget about Randy Johnson. But sometimes with that talent, they'd still stink it up. Sometimes without that talent, they just kind of muddle their way along. But ownership's got to get butts and seats. We got to sell tickets. And sometimes the way to sell a mediocre product is to just make it more than just balls and strikes and to add some personality. So they hired an advertising agency out of Bellevue that I can never remember how to pronounce the name of, but they came up with these quirky little commercials. And Braves fans, it's basically America's team. Braves, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers. You don't have to try. Those are national brands. But when you're talking about maybe the Cincinnati Reds without the Big Red Machine era, or you're talking about the Miami Marlins, or you're talking about the Seattle Mariners, you're either a diehard or you're not. And you got to get a lot more of the you're nots to give a crap and go pay $10 to go sit in the cheap seats and watch a game we might lose. And so they injected personality into this. And if you remember the This Is Sports Center commercials,
Yep.
basically
Yep.
that, but for a city. And the one that made me aware of this, I was on a message board a long time ago about sports and sports logos and branding and all that kind of nerdy stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody had in their signature something about I took my gooey duck to Puyallup. Although I don't know what a gooey duck is, so I took my geoduck to Puyallup. I'm like, what in the hell is that? And so finally, I eventually Googled it, and it was so long ago that still didn't really solve the problem. So I had to try again a few times. And finally, I got clued into this commercial. No context, no
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
but it's I want to say it's Lou Pinella talking to the camera and saying we brought in some new guys and it's we got a lot of youth on this team, but I'm so proud of the veterans because they've really embraced bringing these guys into our culture. And I think it's Edgar Martinez has these straight up grown men in their uniforms in school desks looking at the blackboard, and he's teaching them how to speak Pacific Northwest. He goes, I'd like a double tall latte, please. How about them cougs? And they're repeating it back to him and then looking at each other like, wow. Gooey duck, Puyallup, which is also hard to say. I took my gooey duck to Puyallup. And
Yeah.
and then as it closes and says, Mariners baseball, you're going to love these guys. And he says, yeah, sure, you betcha. He's teaching people how to localize when he has such a pronounced accent that it's clear he's not from here either. And it's just brilliant because it injects so much these are my boys personality, and it teaches somebody from 2,500 miles away what it's all about.
And I don't know if you meant to step into the space that I wanted to go, is that it's not only about getting the cheese, but striving to get the cheese. And that's what sports is about. You come to love a team. I was a Red Sox fan, or still am, because I've always been Red Sox plus wherever I live, just because that's the first game I went to. My dad took me there when we lived in Rhode Island. So we go over to Boston, and so they've got people who are loyal no matter what. Fenway is never not packed, right? It's not if it's a
No,
losing season, nobody's there. And Dawn, who's grown up here, my wife's grown up here, back, Bellevue, from when Bellevue was country. And so she loves them because, she loves the characters, the people, the Ichiros, and not because I couldn't tell you which seasons were winning seasons. That's what's fun about baseball. And I'm a soccer fan, and it's hard to find people to get that. That's different. But baseball seems to attract that, and the effort. And I mean, some of them are, brilliantly talented, but that effort, that striving is every year. Spring training has got there's whole metaphors there for, okay, maybe this year, here we go. We could have a great season, and that being hopeful when the spring comes. So I love baseball, and I want to tie that to another topic: how sports and can build community and connection. People from other cultures can become familia. You can become, you have the diversion de pickles, or whatever the the thing was.
Classic pickles of the north, man.
Del Norte. You have some experience and observations about community and in different tones and of community, depending whether it's downtown Seattle, or I'm out in Kingston. This is rural. This is not even suburban. It's rural, and it's different because I tell people in the East Coast, yeah, the space needle is here, but it's about this big from where I live, and things are different out here. But I'd like to hear you spend a little bit of time talking about what you talk about. What do you mean? Connection, community, which is what I'm about. How is that different in a urban environment versus not urban, in whatever flavor?
Well, and this also ties back in, believe it or not, to the college thing that we were talking about too,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of folks who get the privilege, and let's be real about it, it is a privilege
Sure.
to go to college, to get higher education, whether you get the degree or not, just to be exposed to different points of view, to be prepared in a different way, is it's a privilege that not everybody gets.
Yep.
And it's easy for some of us to take that for granted. But for those of us that do, a lot of us get nostalgic for the times when we were in college. And sometimes it's because you made new friends, or you got to go to the football or basketball or baseball games or whatever it was, or we're all pulling for the same team. We've got the same hoodie on, or whatever it is. Maybe you're just going to drinking parties every single Friday or Saturday night and doing keg stands. And
Yeah, yeah,
man,
yeah.
I missed that where I didn't have to put on a suit. But somebody posted this online years ago, and it hit me to the core, and it changed me. It said maybe the reason why you're so nostalgic for college is that that's the first and only, maybe only time that you experienced real community, that
Oh.
everybody's living together. You're in dorms, you're in apartments, you're riding the shuttle to get to class, you're going to the
Mm.
same ball games, you're cheering for the same team, you've got the same meal plans, and you're going to the quad, and you're doing like you're living in density. You're all in this community together because yeah, statistically more people live in urban areas in New York, in LA, in Chicago than they do not.
Right, right.
That's just a fact of life. But more of the people that I encounter don't. Yeah, if you're talking to somebody in Nashville, we both live in Seattle. That's just all there is to it. If you're talking to somebody in Western Washington, you live in Kingston and I live in Redmond. And they know what that is and they know what that means.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I know so few people that actually live in Seattle, and that's a big deal because I had not experienced urban living. I had not experienced density and planning and transit and structure.
Okay.
And I lived in places that, case in point, big difference between Tennessee and Western Washington is that I was friends with, and I'm still friends with someone. We went to the same high school, and
Right.
I moved across town from that friend. We were about 7 miles apart. We went to the same high school anyway, even
Hmm.
despite moving 7 miles apart. And I think we even had the same zip code. If you go 7 miles in the greater Seattle area, you go through like three different cities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And just the fact that everything's just bunched in. I grew up in a city that has roughly the same population as Bellevue, but twice the land. So the density is down, and it didn't even have a bus system until 2009.
Whoa.
And so transit is not a thing outside of really greater, like not even greater Nashville area, like the Nashville metro area, Davidson County. Beyond that, you're on your own. You're driving a car. And I say that because my wife and I went to London and we didn't want to stay in London. We wanted to stay someplace a little cheaper. And so we were
Right.
still within greater London. I picked out a hotel that was within my price range and made sure it was roughly within walking distance of a transit station, a London Underground. It was near the tube. You just walk to the tube, and I get there and we unpack, and holy crap, I can walk 5 minutes and be at two grocery stores, a produce stall, a drugstore, a gas station, a bakery, like six restaurants, and the tube. And I'm one stop away from Wembley Park, the big stadium where there's all sorts of shopping and entertainment and nightlife. And within 5-10 minutes, I can be on my way to the heart of London without having to think about a car or a timetable. I just know get on this train, stop at this station, switch to this train, and you're there in like 45 minutes. And you can read a book, you can do whatever. And I thought that was just fantastic that I just happened to stumble into this great little opportunity. And then I find out, no, that's just how most of Europe is. That's just how most of Asia is because we went to Hong Kong, which has that, very heavy-handed handprint of England because of how long
Right.
it was a
Right.
colony of England. But same kind of tube system, same kind of thing. You can walk anywhere, walk or ride transit, ride a train, ride a bus. And so I've made a friend online that is from kind of more rural, suburban, coastal England, and she thought that all of us in the states lived in basically New York City. Like she watched Seinfeld and Friends and those sorts of things, and was like, "Wait, you mean you can't just hop on the train and go to
Yeah.
places? You can't just." I love this moment of wait, what? She's like, "You mean what happens when you forget the milk? You can't pop around to the little shop?" Like, no, the closest grocery store to me is a 20-minute walk or 25-minute walk or 5 minutes in the car. So you're going once a week unless you have to get fresh produce or something. And it's just the separation because in other places, density is a given, community and neighborhoods and all of that are the thing, and you don't have to have a car to get around unless you need to haul a load of groceries or you want to go off into the country. And so that has really changed me that I want to be in a place where there's density, there's transit, there's thoughtful consideration to how we interact. I want to be able to walk down the street and get a cup of coffee without needing a change of shirt because it was a 40-minute round trip. And people think I'm nuts because they've never experienced it or they just want to have their own back 40. They want to be in their own land and in their own area. And why would I want to have neighbors 5 stories above me? It's like because that's how a lot of places do it, and I think they do it better. It gives you a sense of community because you're not fighting for I don't want I don't want the kids walking through my backyard. Well, maybe I don't want a backyard. Maybe I want to have Central Park 5 minutes that way. And then I can hear all of the different languages conversing at dinner after work and smell all the different foods. And just you don't meet people anymore. We're just no, this is mine and you will not take what is mine. And I think that's part of what the problem is there's such a disconnect, whether we're rural, suburban, or even whatever the heck you consider Redmond, because it's pretty big for a suburb, but I also I would not be able to walk to downtown Seattle. So I think we need to get out of our bubbles and be with each other. And that would start to solve a lot of these tribal problems.
My brother, I want to let that flow echo in people's minds, those who get to this point in this podcast and listen to that. Those perspectives and observations and recommendations are just among the many things I love about you, man, that you so eloquently serve it up to people to get people to think, wait, what? No, he's been over there and he's seen this. I love what you've seen. And I feel the same way for a similar reason, because I moved a lot and I have that. I like what density brings and otherness brings and variety brings and how you neighborhoods and community, those things we talk about. So I'm so glad I poked the subject and got the flow. So what let's do, and we'll talk some more. I'd even like to think about in the future, maybe you and me co-hosting stuff. I kind of like tandems, and in my business, I have partners that are situational who I work with clients, but I'd like to maybe entertain a thought of somehow co-hosting, so bringing this out of people and getting guests, maybe two guests who they're kind of counterintuitive pairings, not to overuse the Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart stuff, but people who connect you wouldn't think they connect. But thank you for what
Well,
you
and
bring to this table, man.
no worries. And one of the things I want to do, and I'm gonna tiptoe up next to something that's divisive and controversial, but I'm not going there, I promise.
Okay.
But there's been a lot of talk recently about Charlie Kirk
Right.
and his prove me wrong and his debate style and his debate tour. And some people will say that's what was great about him, was that he didn't care if you agreed or disagreed, that he wanted to have a debate and have an intelligent discussion of two people who may oppose each other, but can see if we can find common ground or see if we can agree to disagree, or can you flip me or can I flip you? And others were saying no, he was just a troll. He would go to places where they knew that or where he knew that they hated him, and would get someone that he strongly disagreed with, and then going to get a gotcha out of them so that I can put it on social media and look at me owning the libs, and never mind which perspective on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's it can be very confrontational when you take a liberal and a progressive, or a Christian and an atheist, or a UW fan and a Wazoo fan, and you just bang them against each other. And I think that's the wrong way to do it. I don't like this viral trend I'm seeing where it's one conservative and 10 liberals, or one capitalist and 10 socialists, or whatever it is, and just, will they find common ground or will they just eat each other? No, no, we don't need to do that. We are not on off switches. This is not a binary computer code. We're complicated creatures, and what we need to do is build community. If the biggest thing about you is your MAGA hat, or your I'm with her, or your whatever it is, you're just virtue signaling to your people, and you're inviting controversy with the other folks. And I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it. We all are. But if I see that thing about you that says you're one of mine, then I don't need to talk anymore. You're one of mine. If I see that thing that says you're part of the opposite team, well, bleep you. I don't even want to go any farther. And that happened when I added someone on Facebook recently that's in one of my networking circles. And
Mm.
within 24 hours, that person posted something and I was ready to click the unlike button. I don't want to engage with this person because of XYZ.
Right.
And that's we're falling into the trap of the algorithm. It's all about controversy. And if we can figure out how to build community rather than just, I'm going to socialize with my 5 people at work, I'm going to get in my car by myself and not carpool and not bus and not anything. I'm going to go straight home. I'm going to talk to my wife, pet my dog, water my plants, and go to bed. Yeah, that's not community, and that's not the direction we should be headed.
I agree completely, brother. What I would like to do, and I have my own opinions, and I admitted bias about the whole Charlie Kirk thing and all the things around that. Uh, let's have a future conversation, because the way I feel like you and I've got a lot of commonality in the observations about what is community, and you've heard me say inviting otherness, especially otherness of thought. Inviting that doesn't mean agreeing, but being receptive. So
Yeah.
let's put a bow in it for today, because this is the fun part about you and me. This, as we often are on the phone, we forget to go back and do our jobs, because we got to go get the cheese, and we forget that we're talking about some other food metaphor and getting stuff done. So thank you for your time, my friend. For those of you who are still listening to this, I want to encourage you to go in and search hashtag man called amp. He's does some really clever play-by-play in places you expect and didn't know there was such a thing as play-by-play for some sports that don't always get some time. Amp makes whatever he's talking about and with whom he's talking about it, it makes it much more interesting. And I love how he brings in some insight and his observations on community and travel and whatnot. So I'm hoping, my brother, that you and I are still having these conversations. Not hoping. I'm going to be hunting you down. We don't, even if you move someplace else, I'm going to make this home for the rest of my life, or that's my intent. But let's keep these conversations going and invite otherness. I want to have those who might want to be part of Crow Tribe Conversations, and whether you join AMP and me or any other combination of people we talk with, I'd be intrigued with that. So go to nlwbc.org. You can see our contact information. But today I want you to hear hashtag man called amp. Check it out and find him. He's online in very clever, entertaining ways. And sometimes you get some good stuff you didn't expect. So any last words, my brother?
No, I think I'm going to just leave it right there. But appreciate all the opportunities, and go Dogs.
All right, go Devils. Cheers.